Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a continued passion for public television, we are proud to underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES Television.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Though prohibited by council ordinance from using the city's apartment in the Pontalba Building for overnight stays, surveillance videos apparently show Mayor LaToya Cantrell and a group of guests having done that during the Essence Festival weekend. Also, the mayor on several occasions arrived there in a city van with police escorts. On some occasions, Officer Jeffrey Vappie, who had taken trips with the mayor for protection, was said to have been transferred from that detail, was providing security. Elsewhere, there was no long stay in Baton Rouge, where the special override session ended early. We'll look at what was overridden and the politics behind what wasn't. Hurricane season has been calm so far, but not the insurance industry. Companies bailing out from states, including Florida, raise the question of what does that say for Louisiana? We will also examine what was learned from the recent gubernatorial campaign finance reports, and in Jefferson Parish, school closings are causing an increase in charter school activity. Plus, there is turmoil from at least one suburban yard over wildflowers. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Greg Loureros, editor, Louisiana Illuminator. Michael Finch, staff writer, The Times-Picayune, The New Orleans Advocate. And Marie Fazio, staff writer, The Picayune and The Advocate. And we will go over to Errol first with the Mayor Cantrell in the Pontalba story. Lisa Orrick did some reporting from Fox 8 News on that, and you wanted to talk about this story.
Well, you know, all around the Jackson Square, as it is throughout the quarter, there were surveillance cameras, especially around Jackson Square. And the idea, of course, is to protect a very historic area from vandalism. No one ever envisioned, I don't think, that would also have the extra service of watching out for mayors, perhaps of using public property. But that's happened. This is the second incident. There was one, several months ago, when Lisa Orrick and Channel 8, who've done some really good reporting on this, were able to get access to those surveillance cameras, and they said that she was actually spending many days living there. But more recently at the Essence Festival, the Essence Festival weekend, there was scenes of her with some guests, 4 guests that looked like all female guests, I assume, and they were there, they were coming and going. It looks like they stayed overnight because by the timing she arrived late at night and left the next day, and she was dressed differently. But the point is that since the last time, the council passed a law saying that people can't stay overnight, that you just can't do that. Now, I guess it's a question of how do you defend overnight, but by most people's idea, I mean, you know, if you're there late and you leave early, it is. And it's only for a few nights. But the other thing, which I think really raised some eyebrows, is that on several incidents, she arrived there in a police SUV with a motorcycle escort. Now, if you look at the video, which is on Fox 8's website, you'll see a lot of scenes of what happened. It wasn't clear to me how many times this happened or what, and so I emailed Lisa Orrick, who, by the way, was invited to be on the show, but couldn't do it, and I asked him about that, and he said that the motorcycle escorts brought the mayor's SUV with guests in and out of French Quarter at least 9 times over Essence weekend, including past 1 a.m. And as far as Officer Vappie, who was the one who traveled with Mayor Cantrell and who spent a lot of time in that apartment in the past incident, Vappie was spotted 4 times. He never went inside the apartment, but he gave 2 of the guests a hug. So it's really interesting to see, and you can see him kind of going back and forth. This has really gotten the council angry, because when the council had a hearing they wanted to put some sort of, there were no rules against doing this. And so they tried to come up with rules, and there were some people that wanted to be tougher. Councilman Morrell really wanted stricter rules than they got. And he even said, when it passed, he says, this is better than nothing, but it's not much better than nothing because we're not doing much. He says, just watch one day, this is going to come back. And it's come back. And so the council, I know, is going to be revisiting that. And there are different ideas. One idea that was back from the beginning was just get rid of this. This goes back to the early days when one apartment was designated for the city. Get rid of that, get the Vehicle Rate Commission just to rent it, make it for tourists. You can get $40,000 a year. And so that seems to be one idea.
I think one suggestion was even to throw it over to the French Market Corporation with the idea of take it out of the mayor's hands, but the mayor controls the appointees to that French Market group. Right. So really, I don't know that there's much of a relief there for them.
Yeah. Now, mostly, in the past, I said, well, that'd be kind of blatant for the mayor to do that. The mayor's not shy of things that are blatant. I mean, to be doing this after all that and to be on camera as all this is going on. So this has raised that issue again, and there's got to be something that comes out of it. But I never thought I'd compare LaToya Cantrell to Richard Nixon. But during Richard Nixon, there used to be a talk about the imperial presidency, about the idea of abusing power, about overdoing your power. And this is like the imperial mayor.
Well, has the mayor responded to what others see as controversy over her being
at
here?
least not of today. The Channel 8 in their report sent a whole list of questions to Channel 8, and as of today, they hadn't received one. There is a website, which I recommend that everybody looks at and see the full story. It's fox8live.com, and look for the one that starts off Zurich, Mayor Cantrell, goes on and on. But it's worth sitting down a few minutes. It's a long report, but just watching all the details is something people need to know about.
Okay, we'll see where this one takes us. Okay, thanks a lot. Greg, over to you. Veto override session, and it sort of came and went real quick.
Yeah, it did. There were 3 bills that targeted LGBTQ plus youth that were essentially the headliner, and there seemed to be the most steam for overriding the governor's vetoes on that. In the end, just one out of that 3, the ban on gender-affirming care for minors, was struck down. Others that dealt with the school setting, the use of a student's preferred pronouns in a chosen name, and discussions of gender identity and sexual orientation. Those 2 narrowly missed. I think you're going to see those 2 brought up again next year, when we expect the legislature is going to lean more right Republican rather than moderate Republican in its leadership where it is now. And of course, you're more than likely to have a Republican governor who won't veto those bills should they reach his or her desk.
Okay, as far as the one that was overridden, the governor had something to say about that, his comments.
Yeah, so what's interesting is that, he now claims, I guess, sort of like a, unwanted rank of having the most bills overridden by the legislature, but it's a grand total of 2. And one of those was the redistricting bill, which is now caught up in the courts, and now this one with the gender-affirming care, I think that's court-bound as well. Similar laws were passed in a handful of other states. All of them have been challenged in court and blocked from enforcement. 2 went to the appellate level of federal court, where they essentially put the ban in place. So this is going to play out over a long time in court.
So some of the other measures that the governor did veto, they were not overridden. So sort of tell us what stays, in terms of his veto, and also specifically with the budget. He put that $100 million back in, so that stays just for the health department.
There was, I believe, just a huge reluctance for lawmakers to get involved with the budget, because for any move they had to make, there was a corresponding takeaway or addition. And Senate President Paige Cortez made it known that, we're just not going to mess with it. And the House leaders, I think, were okay with that as well. I've found interesting that all of the criminal justice related bills went untouched either. Now, this could be an instance like with the bill to keep onlookers 25 feet away from police. The author of that bill, Representative Mike Johnson of Pineville, said, I'm just going to try again next year. And I think that's what you're going to have another one. One of the bills that passed that I was keeping an eye out for would treat 17-year-olds as adults upon arrest for crimes of violence. Again, just never got up or was even brought up for a vote.
Oh, okay, so the governor did override that.
Yeah,
right?
he did.
He
Yeah.
did. He did override that. And there was some issue with that, even from circles that maybe you would have thought would have supported it, but they were concerned about the fact that it started from arrest, not conviction.
Right. And it's not to say that there aren't things happening that will bring about more stricter punishments for juveniles and for crimes of violence. But I think with this one, it was the idea that we're putting them in adult facilities from the get-go, where a youth offender or an accused youth offender would have to be held in the same facility as adults. Right there, that's a constitutional concern. And wherever you look, it seems there's just no room or inadequate facilities for youth.
Okay, so as far as the governor's concerned, he has faced, what, 3 override sessions? Or 2?
This would be 2. One was done mid-session, so this
Okay.
was the second override session, separate.
So overall, how is he going to be judged on these sessions?
That's a good one because, he's sort of played the moderate hand throughout his tenure. But I think he's taking a real beating from the far-right conservatives for standing up for the LGBTQ plus community, for standing his ground in regards to let's not walk back on the criminal justice reforms as he described them back in 2016. So I think the book is still out a bit. I think, there are going to be candidates that separate themselves from the governor as we see the fall elections arrive, but others that I think want to champion his cause.
But consider that the legislature is a Republican supermajority, and he's a Democrat. He's not doing badly. I mean,
No, I think he got a lot more done than folks anticipated with that,
Right.
clashing parties.
All righty, Greg, thanks a lot. Mike, on over to you. Here we are now really getting into the heart of hurricane season, which makes everybody's heart stop, kind of. We're still having an insurance issue, but we're not, as Louisiana is, we're not the only state that is having a problem with insurance.
Yeah, absolutely. Florida is notably experiencing the aftershock that we experienced last year. Florida, Hurricane Ian landfalled in Florida last year, and now 1 year later, when those same insurers are sort of reevaluating their book of business, you see a lot of big headlines where large companies, notably Farmers, is saying that they're sort of in retreat in Florida. They're going to stop writing policies. There may even be some non-renewals. I'm not exactly sure. This pattern is not exactly, as uncomfortable as it is for homeowners to hear. It's not unfamiliar and it's not uncommon. It's typically what happens. We saw it after Hurricane Ida. Several companies, sending notices to the Department of Insurance saying that we can't take the hit again, and we're going to have to pull our business out of the state.
But are we seeing here in Louisiana some movement by some of these major companies to stop writing or pulling out in some fashion?
I do not know yet. Typically, what's interesting about the Florida case is that, this stuff typically happens under the radar. Like, consumers will know, insurance agents will definitely know when certain companies are not writing, or certain zip codes or certain locales are just not desirable for them. But what's interesting lately is that we're seeing a lot of big headlines in California, in Florida, where big companies are saying, and I don't know if it's just like a publicity angle or if it's really something shifting underneath the hood for them, where they're saying, like, we're not going to do this anymore. But in terms of Louisiana, I don't know yet if any of the big companies are making that kind of move yet. But I will know soon, but I just don't know right now.
So like in the case of Farmers and maybe some of the insurers out in California, they're keeping some of their customers on their rolls. They're just not going to write new policy. Is that what they're doing?
That's typically the approach that they take. They're just saying, like, we're sort of like trying to freeze time in a sense. They may even sort of do some selective non-renewing of policies, or they might make the underwriting criteria more difficult for homeowners to abide by. And that's how they sort of adjust or rebalance their book so that they're not overexposed and could potentially ruin their finances.
Or the sticker price, too. That's chasing some people away undoubtedly as well. making people think, well, maybe I'll just insure myself because the cost has gone up so much. So insurers now, they have what's called an incentive fund, what the state calls an incentive fund. So we have a number of insurers who are taking part in that here now in the state.
We do. The insurance commissioner, Jim Donnellan, he lobbied successfully earlier this year in a special session to get, what was it, $45 million set aside to attract insurers, or to at least encourage them to write policies in Louisiana. He is seeing some moderate success in terms of, these companies. I think it was 9 companies that ultimately applied. And I believe they've written about 17,000 policies, largely in Orleans, Jefferson, St. Tammany Parish, and I believe also St. Charles Parish. What the wild card, and I guess we still don't know yet, is whether or not they're going to take policies away from Louisiana citizens. This was a big part of his pitch, was that Louisiana citizens, the state's insurer of last resort, will be at great risk of potentially, if we got a big storm, it could be very difficult for them to pay all of those claims. I believe their policy count is up to at least 130,000. I'm pretty sure that it's probably grown beyond that, and it may be as high as 140,000 at this point.
Because we had so many insurers go insolvent or leave. E?
Yeah, I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard somebody say that Florida has a reputation as being especially litigious, that there's a lot of lawsuits out of Florida. I guess maybe if you live on a tongue of land between the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean, by nature, you're going to be trigger happy on that.
Well, Florida, has developed a reputation over the last 10 years of being an exceptionally litigious place. They had this provision in state law that allowed consumers to assign the rights of their insurance claim to a third party, and a lot of recovery, like disaster recovery companies, saw this as an opportunity to make a lot of money. So they seized on this opportunity in Florida by jacking up, inflating the value of claims. They'll show up at a home, for example, and maybe there's some roof damage, but all of a sudden there'll be like mold everywhere and everything has to be taken down. All of this generates more work for them, and this is basically what happened. And if an insurer resists, they can just sue the insurer and recover the attorney's fees, and judges are typically more likely to grant consumers, their requests, because they're more sympathetic to consumers, and that's how Florida's litigious situation just went out of control over a decade or so.
Complex issue, but a real important one. All right, Michael, thanks so much. All right, Marie, I'll over to you. Now, we heard earlier this year Jefferson Parish closed some schools because of declining enrollment, et cetera, and this was a budget issue. But you have discovered that we're seeing a growing enrollment now in charter schools there.
Right, so this projection, which was presented before the board at a recent school board meeting where they also passed the budget, comes on the heels of that announcement that the school district, as they face changing demographics, much like New Orleans, much like so many metro districts across the country, they will be closing 6 schools. So in these projections, these numbers, I don't know, I can't say for a fact that they're caused by these closures. I think it's far too soon to say that, but the school district does project that more Jefferson Parish students will choose over the coming years to attend charter schools versus traditional public schools. So for example, just in context, that looks like next year a jump of about 300 students, which will bring it up to 8,500 or so attending both Type 1 charter schools, which are authorized by the Jefferson Parish School Board, and Type 2, which are authorized by the state and can pull students from wherever. So these projections aren't altogether unexpected, and you could say that this is, the system working. Charter schools have their place, as the superintendent and several school board members explained to me over the past couple of weeks. Like this is all part of a greater school system in Jefferson Parish. But nonetheless, it does prompt some concerns for school board members who anticipate a pinching of finances over the next couple years, particularly if this trend continues.
Keep in mind, though, I think we all need to keep in mind that charter schools are indeed public schools. And basically the money is following the student wherever the student is going to attend.
Exactly. I spoke with Caroline Romer, who is the director of the Louisiana Association of Public charter schools, and she said exactly that. School boards tend to think of themselves almost in a monopoly, and but it is up to a parent and a student to choose where they attend school, and the money does follow the student.
Okay, so it remains to be seen how the overall impact to the school system. But as you said, the school superintendent said, the focus here is to make the system the best it possibly can be for all students.
Yes, and he expressed some optimism that, as these school changes go into effect, as the 6 schools close next year, students will be attending better quality facilities, and they're planning for, this won't be the last set of school closures that Jefferson Parish will see, but they also have a couple new facilities planned. So ideally, they're basically reorganizing how they're using their resources, and he's optimistic that that'll pull more students into the parish.
And right now, there are how many charters in Jefferson?
7 authorized by Jefferson Parish School Board.
Okay, all righty, Marie, thanks a lot. Greg, over to you, because we are in a governor's race. What's the spending like? Who's got the most money?
Jeff Landry, by far. His campaign pulled in another $2.2 million, and he received $2 million from the state Republican Party. And why that number is so big is because early on they deemed him their endorsed candidate. So that rules that money out for anyone else in the race. His closest competitor, you could say, could be either Stephen Waguespack or John Schroeder in terms of money. Schroeder still has about $2 million in the bank between the Waguespack campaign and the Political Action Committee that's doing much of the spending for Waguespack's campaign. They're in that $2.5 million neighborhood. Just to round things out, you've got the Democratic contender Sean Wilson, who reported about $600,000 in funds raised, and he got into the game really late. So this is really his first reporting period. And Hunter Lundy lent himself another $700,000. I mean, he's totally self-financed, but not really making much of a nit in the polls. And also far back would be State Senator Sharon Hewitt and State Representative Richard Nelson. But right now, just in terms of money, you've got Landry and spending a lot of it on TV ads. Same goes for Waguespack. And Schroeder's really kind of established a regular presence on TV and radio as well.
From the get-go, he was sort of the first, really sort of consistent. Started off with making his gumbo, if you recall, on that spot, which had a lot of people talking about that, how he made a gumbo. But he has really made a big television presence, Schroeder has. He needed to get the name recognition out there.
Exactly. I think that's really, if we're looking at, Landry obviously has the decisive edge here in polls and in fundraising. Waguespack, we've discussed this before. I don't know that enough people know who he is beyond someone that was fairly active in the Jindal administration and with the business lobby. I don't know that he's really told people who he is, what he's about. I think Schroeder's making up in that ground, but still the polls don't necessarily show it yet. And to bring this back to the veto override session, I have to wonder, if either of those Republicans start fairly soon, qualifying's coming up August 8th through 10th, to distance themselves from the very far right Landry and look at maybe appealing to more moderate voters. I really think that's where the outcome of the race is going to be decided.
Okay, we're going to be seeing it really gear up, not
soon.
too far. Yeah, very soon.
And for all that, there are still people who really don't like Jeff Landry.
Which is basically behind the Waguespack campaign. Yeah.
So we will see. Okay, thanks a lot. Let's go on over to Marie to wrap us up right now. It was the Wildflower Fight out in Jefferson.
Yes, so earlier this spring, a couple in Airline Park neighborhood in Metairie scattered wildflower seeds across their front lawn, and they bloomed into this sprawling garden of purple, pink, white. It's really a sight to see. And then a few weeks ago in late May, they got a notice on their front door that said, a neighbor had filed a complaint with the parish, and they were in violation of a parish ordinance that says you cannot have growth higher than 8 inches. So that they've fought hard for their garden, and they were initially the citation triggered a hearing, and I just found out this week that the parish is backing down. They're going to negotiate allowable growth and figure out how to move forward and let them have their wildflower garden. And a lot of the Louisiana Native Plant Association experts that I spoke with spoke about the benefits of having native indigenous plants in a garden, and in terms of biodiversity and feeding pollinators. And
Right, for the birds and the bees and the butterflies.
Yeah,
Hummingbirds are
exactly.
celebrating that.
Yeah.
It's a big win. Yeah.
And so the rules that are in place are for weeds and for grass not to be, for overgrown lawns, et cetera, which really could be a hazard.
Correct, yes, and I think it was put in place in 2013. They lowered the allowable height from 12 inches to 8 inches because of post-Katrina blight in an effort to mitigate that a little bit. But it seems that they're going to be able to keep their garden.
Well, that would be very, very nice.
I'm going to say during Bob Becker's last years in City Park, he wanted, it was his last year so he could do what he wanted. He wanted a plot of land that had wildflowers. And some people say, wildflowers? Yeah, and they did it. And it was really popular. People loved it.
Photo spot.
You just went out and stopped it, and they made little trails around there, and it had this really natural feel to it. So
it's really
good
lovely.
deal, yeah.
People take their pictures there,
Absolutely,
their
yeah,
family
yeah.
pictures, their wedding pictures. It's really, really lovely. Okay, we'll see where this goes because we are seeing folks want more and more nature around them. So
Yeah, absolutely.
we'll see where it goes. Thanks a lot, Marie. All right, other stories, E.
There's another controversy about LaToya Cantrell. It's being investigated about whether or not she improperly used public funds for personal politicking during the recall effort. There were some flyers that went out kind of making the defense about her administration, but it seems to be backed by public funds, and so that's being investigated.
Okay, over to you, Greg.
Coming up Monday, State Superintendent of Education Cade Brumley will be speaking to Moms for Liberty. The Southern Poverty Law Center calls them an extremist group, and critics say Governor Edwards should do something about this. It's not a good look, they say.
Okay, Mike?
Another long-running consumer issue. This week, Orleans Parish Assessor Errol Williams released the statistics on the overall property value increase. It's up 23%, which might give homeowners a little more heartburn in addition to their insurance concerns.
Right, the bills just keep going up,
Yeah.
don't they? Okay, Mike, thanks. Marie?
I'll have a story this weekend about efforts to bury deeper the 34-mile water line that runs from Grand Isle to Lafitte that gives Grand Isle a source of fresh drinking water as well as sources their fire hydrants, and has been hit through storms and by vessels. And
Be very important to them, crucial, I'm sure.
Yes, for
Yeah,
sure.
indeed. All right, guys, thanks a lot for being here. Thank you all for joining us, too. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a continued passion for public television, we are proud to underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES Television.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.